Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll hold this for you. We'll send it. एक साउंड बाइट भी सर से ली.
Thank you so much. I did. Thank you.
मीनाक्षी जी big news hota hai and media also creates fiction. So we have only 3 fellows right now of our residents. The rest are CBCs. यहाँ साइड में आ जाइए, यहाँ भी जगह है. We are very honored today to have in our midst Shri Bibek Debroy and his wife Shri and our Vice Chairman Saab who is here. We will start with a lamp lighting, an auspicious welcoming of the light to dispel the darkness. May I invite Shri to light the first wick. Bibek down to the stage, please. Shri Bibek Debroy. Our Vice Chairman, Professor Chamanlal Gupta ji. Janji. Please sit down, please sit down. Thank you all very much for coming here this morning. मुझे बहुत खुशी हो रही है क्योंकि इंस्टीट्यूट में पहली बार इस तरह की गैदरिंग हो रही है जहाँ पे शिमला से इतने लोग आए हैं। तो मैं आप सबका स्वागत करता हूँ और शुक्रिया अदा भी करना चाहता हूँ कि आप लोग आए। ठंड भी काफ़ी है फिर भी आप आए। Memorial Lecture is our flagship event and I'm really happy and proud that our speaker today, Shri Bibek Debroy, has come to us from Delhi, despite the cold, braving the cold weather. We are extremely honored and grateful to you, sir, for taking the trouble to come here. I'll be saying a few words about Shri Debroy in a minute, but I want to remember Professor Dr. Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan ji, who was first our Vice President and then the President of India, and he, in his generosity and vision, gave a part of the presidential estate to this institute. And this was during the Cold War in 1965. And President Radhakrishnan thought that there should be a place in India जहाँ पे सभ्यता संस्कृति पे गहरा चिंतन होना चाहिए कि विश्व की जो परिस्थिति है, इतना तनाव है दुनिया में, तो भारत इसमें क्या योगदान दे पाए। तो with such a vision, he created this institute, and I'm happy that we have survived despite all kinds of ups and downs these 6 decades or so. So for our flagship event, as I said, we have India's most distinguished intellectual, I would say academic, economist, but what is more, Indologist. He's been one of the founding members of the NITI Aayogon. He has the rank of a minister, and apart from that, what people don't know is that he is the greatest translator that we have in our midst today, not only in the 21st century, but possibly in the second half of the 20th century in India. Latter, Manmata Nath Datta did it around the end of the 19th century, and he lived till, the early parts of the 20th century, 1912 if I'm not mistaken. This is 2.5 million words, which Bibek has translated, 10 volumes published now by Penguin, and this is in addition to all his onerous tasks, all the jobs he has held. And not only has he translated the Mahabharata, he has also translated the Ramayana. This has been published in 3 volumes by Penguin. In addition, he has translated the Bhagavad Puran. Now, if you know J.L. Mehta, one of our greatest philosophers, said that the Mahabharata, the Ramayana and the Bhagavad Puran are the basis of popular Indian culture and civilization. These are, इन्हीं ग्रंथ से ये पूरे भारत की जो संस्कृति है, इसी पे टिके हैं ये 3 ग्रंथ. In addition, he has translated huge portions of the Vedas, of the Upanishads, at least 10 Upanishads he has translated into English from Sanskrit. Not only that, he has also translated the Harivamsha and several Puranas. If you add up all these volumes, I'm sure they exceed more than the magical number of 100. So sir ne to century maar diya hai, So I think he's already been honored with a Padma Shri, but that doesn't speak even to a fraction of the work he has actually done. Now, I don't want to stand between you and him, but I also want to tell you one little thing. He's also a very brave and courageous individual. For many years, he used to head the Rajiv Gandhi Foundation. And, I suppose a part of his job was to, should I say, criticize the Gujarat model of development because of the then Chief Minister of Gujarat, Shri Narendra Modi, who is now our PM. But he came out with a report where he actually said that this works, and he immediately lost his job. So very few people have the courage to, not only to stand up to their convictions, but face the facts. The data showed something, and he had the courage to actually say it publicly. So today, this topic speaks to the heart of India's, should I say, problem today, which is how to reconcile our immense wealth of tradition, with the challenges of modernity. So the topic is the Dharma of translation. And please think about it. Are we all translated individuals, Are we authentic? It's something for us to reflect. And how much do we know of our own past, of our own tradition? And the subtitle tells us all. So the Dharma of translation, Sanskrit texts in contemporary times. I will now invite our Vice Chairman, Dr. Chamanlal Gupta ji, to say a few words. Let me also tell you he's a great scholar and he's himself a great translator.
Dr. Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan जी के 23वें व्याख्यान श्रृंखला में ये भाषण आज का आयोजित है। इस अवसर पर हमारे बीच, जैसा कि आदरणीय प्रांतपति जी ने आपके सामने रखा, हिंदुस्तान के या यूँ कहें विश्व के महानतम अर्थशास्त्री और भारतीय ज्ञान परंपरा को भारतीय भाषा में और अंग्रेजी में प्रस्तुत करने वाले विद्वान विवेक देवरॉय जी उपस्थित हैं। इस अवसर पर इस सभागार में उपस्थित शिमला के अत्यधिक सम्माननीय विद्वानों का मैं हृदय से अभिनंदन करता हूं, स्वागत करता हूं। ये एक ऐसा अवसर है जबकि हम एक और डॉक्टर राधाकृष्णन जी को याद करते हैं, जिन्होंने कि भारतीय ज्ञान परंपरा को पश्चिम के सम्मुख रखा और साथ ही प्लेटो का जो फिलोसफर किंग्स का विचार था वो कुछ अर्थों में डॉक्टर राधाकृष्णन के माध्यम से पूरा हुआ इस देश के अंदर। आज का ये जो व्याख्यान है शिमला वासियों के लिए बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण इसलिए है कि ऐसे अवसर दिल्ली में तो बहुत आसानी से मिलते हैं और हमें लगा कि शिमला के अंदर इतना बड़ा उच्च अध्ययन संस्थान है और यहाँ के लोगों को वंचित रहना पड़ता है ऐसी महान विभूतियों के विचारों से। इस बार विवेक दा को हमने कष्ट दिया है सही मानों में सर्दियों में कि आप हम लोगों पर कृपा करें, कम से कम यहाँ के लोगों को भी आपके विचार सुनने का अवसर मिले। इसलिए आग्रहपूर्वक उनको यहाँ याद किया और वे आए हैं, बहुत आभारी हूँ। लेकिन वो कितने बड़े इंसान हैं वो मैंने कल 2.5 घंटे में जाना। और मैं मानता हूं कि परिचय वर्षों महीनों में नहीं होता है तो कई बार एक क्षण में हो जाता है, और नहीं होता तो आप पूरी जिंदगी किसी के साथ काट देते हैं, आप उससे परिचित रहते हैं। जिस तरह से अपने पुराने पूर्वजों के गांव की चर्चा की और बांग्लादेश जाते समय रास्ते में उनका पुश्तैनी गांव था, उनके व्यक्तित्व का एक दूसरा पहलू मेरे सामने आया। 2-2.5 घंटे में इन्होंने कम से कम 100 लोगों की स्थानों की घटनाओं की चर्चा की। मैं बड़े जिज्ञासु भाव से एक श्रोता के नाते सुन रहा था। शायद मैंने बीच में कुछ भी नहीं बोला क्योंकि मुझे बहुत आनंद आ रहा था। लग रहा था कि एक बहुत ही मंथर गति से एक विचारों का प्रवाह चल रहा है, धारा चल रही है। मुझे लगता है कि एक आदमी जो अपनी जड़ों से गहरे में जुड़ा है वही इन चीज़ों पर ध्यान दे सकता है, साधारण व्यक्ति नहीं दे सकता। ये मेरे लिए बहुत ही आनंद के क्षण थे जब हम इकट्ठे बैठे और उनके साथ बैठकर ये सब कुछ सुनने को मुझे मिला। और मुझे लगता है ट्रांसलेशन के ऊपर, अनुवाद के ऊपर बोलने का उनसे बड़ा अधिकारी हमारे पास पूरे देश में नहीं है। और आज ट्रांसलेशन तो एक माध्यम है, लेकिन उसके माध्यम से उन्होंने क्या पाना चाहा और किस तरह से इस धर्म को निभाया, इसकी चर्चा वे आपके सामने अवश्य करेंगे और हम सब उससे लाभान्वित होंगे। अनुवाद मेरे लिए एक शौक रहा है, छुटपुट अनुवाद करता रहा। दलाई लामा जी के संसर्ग में आने का मौका मिला धर्मशाला में, उनके जन्मदिन पे गया, उन्होंने अपनी आत्मकथा माई लैंड माई पीपल मुझे भेंट की। मैंने विनम्रतापूर्वक कहा कि सर मैं इसे हिंदी में पढ़ना चाहूँगा। He said, but we don't have a translation of this. अभी तक हमने इसको हिंदी में अनुवाद कराया नहीं। तो मेरा एक सीधा सा प्रश्न था कि सर आप 50 वर्ष से यहाँ रह रहे हैं धर्मशाला में, आपकी सारी पुस्तकें जो हैं अंग्रेजी में हैं, हिंदी में आपका पब्लिकेशन ब्यूरो कुछ भी नहीं छापता, तो आप भारतीयों से कैसे जुड़ पाएंगे? और वहाँ धर्मशाला में बड़ी टेंशन चल रही थी, तिब्बतन के साथ बड़ा संघर्ष चल रहा था। तो उन्होंने कहा कि ठीक है हम हिंदी में शुरू करेंगे। फिर उन्होंने शुरू किया और उस किताब को ट्रांसलेट करने की जिम्मेवारी मुझे दी। वो की तो अगले साल जब गया था, और इतने बढ़िया व्यक्ति, विश्व के एक धर्म के मुखिया, एक नोबेल लॉरिएट, एक राज्याध्यक्ष, और उसके बाद भी एक बच्चे की तरह निरीह दलाई लामा जी बैठे बैठे उठे, अपने कमरे में गए, अंदर अपनी एक लेटेस्ट किताब उठाकर लाए, एथिक्स फॉर द न्यू मिलेनियम। वुड यू लाइक टू ट्रांसलेट इट? नेक्स्ट इट विल बी माय गुड फॉर्चून, आई वुड लाइक टू डू इट। हमने वो भी किया। तो मेरा कहने का भाव ये है कि ट्रांसलेशन करते समय जो आनंद आता है वो सामान्य किताब को पढ़ते समय नहीं आता। तब आप उस किताब की आत्मा के भीतर झांकने का प्रयास करते हैं और उस विषय से जुड़े बिना आप ट्रांसलेशन नहीं कर सकते। तो मेरा अपना अनुभव ये रहा है कि जब कभी मैंने कोई भी ट्रांसलेशन का काम किया है, उस विषय की आत्मा के साथ एकाकार जब तक आप नहीं होते, एक अच्छा अनुवाद संभव नहीं है। उन्हें आप सबका हार्दिक अभिनंदन करता हूँ, स्वागत करता हूँ। मैं लगभग अधिकांश लोगों को जानता हूँ, किसी का नाम नहीं ले रहा ताकि मैं भेदभाव का दोषी न माना जाऊँ। मैं सभी को नमस्कार करता हूँ, अभिनंदन करता हूँ और आग्रह करता हूँ अपने मुख्य अतिथि, मुख्य वक्ता विवेक देवराय जी से ये अपना व्याख्यान प्रस्तुत करें।
Professor Chimanlal Gupta, the Vice Chairman of the Institute, Dr. Makaran Paranjape, the Director of the Institute, ladies and gentlemen, Let me first thank the Institute, particularly the Vice Chairman and the Director, who have said a lot of kind words that I don't quite deserve, for having extended this invitation to me. I'm extremely conscious of that honor, particularly considering the fact that this particular lecture series, as the director pointed out, is named after Professor Radhakrishnan, and I'm deliberately using the word professor. And thanks to all of you for having decided it was worth your while to come and listen to me. The title of the talk that Professor Paranjape and I agreed on is something that's up there, and he mentioned it. It's the Dharma of translation, Sanskrit classics in contemporary times. As you can see, I don't have a written text. So what I will speak to you about is more in the nature of spontaneous, unstructured thoughts. And those thoughts will be under 4 heads. The first head will be on the importance of Sanskrit. The second head will be on translating from Sanskrit to English in general. The third head will be specifically on the kind of Sanskrit texts I am translating. And the fourth head will focus on why it is important for all of us to read those particular texts, if not in Sanskrit, at least in some translation or the other. To begin with, the importance of Sanskrit. Sanskrit, directly, indirectly, has influenced all the various so-called vernacular languages that we speak. The degree may vary, and by no means is it my suggestion that it is a one-way flow. There have been two-way flows. But all the languages, all the so-called vernacular languages that we speak have a link with Sanskrit. Sanskrit is a link language. Sanskrit was a link language, and Sanskrit can be a link language. There is a famous kavya by Sri Harsha, and it is called Naishad Charit. Naishad refers to the king of the Nishadas. In this particular case, Nala. Some of you may be aware of the Nala Damayanti story, which figures in several of our texts. And here in Naishad Charit, we have Sri Harsha's portrayal of Damayanti Swayamvar, where various kings have come from various parts of the country to seek Damayanti's hand in marriage. And Sri Harsha tells us that all of these kings who have assembled from different parts of the country have a problem in communicating with each other because they all speak individual languages. But what language did Swami Vivekananda use to converse with the Maharaja of Mysore, or with the Maharaja of Travancore, or with the Maharaja of some other place? He conversed in Sanskrit. If I look up the entry for Swami Vivekananda in Wikipedia, it will tell me he was a Hindu monk. Swami Vivekananda had a disciple. He is what is called a Grihi disciple, meaning he had not taken sannyas. And absolutely Sharat Chandra Chakravarti. And Sharat Chandra Chakravarti maintained a diary. And in that diary, he tells us about one particular incident where someone else comes to visit them and talks about one of Sri Ramakrishna's Grihi disciples, Sri Ma. To which, by the way, anything that I quote in Sanskrit, I will translate, don't worry. To which Swami Vivekananda responds, Vayam tattan nishat hata madhukara tvang khalu kriti. O B, we have been destroyed in our search for the truth, you alone are successful. Referring to that disciple, Sri Ma, who has been successful, and we are the ones who have failed. What is interesting about this is, where does this little bit of Sanskrit come from? It comes from Kalidasa's Avigyan Shakuntala, where Dushyanta sees a bee hovering around Shakuntala's lips and says this. Now note, here is someone, Hindu monk, who is supposed to know about Vedanta, is supposed to know about Upanishads, but what is he quoting from? He is quoting from what is Sahitya, from literature. This is the kind of felicity that we used to have with Sanskrit. And it is a felicity that is increasingly dying out. It is dying out almost entirely because of the terrible way Sanskrit is taught. Not just in institutions of higher education, beginning with the schools. What is a language? Any language is bhasha. Bhasha means bhashate, you speak it. That's the way we learnt all the languages we are familiar with. You speak it, you make mistakes, you are corrected, and then you learn the language. Do you learn a language by memorizing grammar tables? You don't. So if Sanskrit is going to be taught by memorizing grammar tables, obviously everyone will lose interest. And that is the way we have destroyed Sanskrit. Despite the fact that Sanskrit is deeply ingrained in many of our words. I'm not going to use 11:30, I'm going to use something simpler. Had I asked you a little while ago, what is the time? You'd have said, Soa Egara. What is Soa? Sapada. The word pada in Sanskrit means quarter. So Soa is nothing but a quarter plus. A quarter plus 11, Soa Egara. A little before that, Pone Egara. What is Pone? Padona. A quarter left before 11. Sarvebhya Namaha. Adya etasmin sabhagrihe aham Sanskrita Vishaya kinchit vaktum ichhami. I am certain almost everyone here understood exactly what I said. It's not a difficult language at all. And it is important to understand language. it is important to understand the way Sanskrit operates, because in my view, whatever be the definition of culture, whatever be the definition of Sanskriti, cannot be de-linked from language. Language and Sanskriti, Sanskrita and Sanskriti, they are intimately connected with each other. The way we view the world is based on language. And one needs to understand the nature of the Sanskrit language. The nature of the Sanskrit language is such that there are verbal roots. The verb is important. There are verbal roots. If I know the meaning of the verbal root, I will be able to reasonably guess the meaning of any word. I have lost you, so let me explain. This chair. There are many words in Sanskrit for the word chair. One of them will be asandaha. What is the meaning of asandaha? Something that gives a posture. So when I see asandaha, when I confront the word asandaha, the image that is coming to my mind is not just of a chair, but of something that is giving me a posture. A tree. Many words for a tree. One of the words for a tree in Sanskrit is padapaha. And what is padapaha? It is something that drinks with its feet. So when I see padapaha, it is not just a tree. It is something that is drinking with its feet. Makarand. Makarandaha. What does Makarandaha mean? What does Makarandaha mean? Bringer. Yes and no. Because remember what I said, the root, verbal root is important. So Makarandaha is something that either substantiates Makara or surpasses Makara. Makara being associated with Kamdev, Madan. So depending on what I mean, Makarandaha can mean a bee, it can mean the filament of a lotus, it can mean a jasmine, it can mean honey, it can mean all of these things, and all of these meanings are perfectly accurate because it is the verbal root that is important. Gayatri, as in Gayatri sitting there. The moment I hear Gayatri, at the back of my mind, immediately something that is being sung in 3 steps. So the Gayatri mantra, Bhur Bhuva Swaha is not really part of the Gayatri mantra. Tat Savitur Varenyam Bhargadevasya Dhimai Dhiyo Yo No Prachodayat. 3 lines. My wife is sitting there, her name is Suparna. I'm pronouncing it in the Sanskrit way, not the Bengali way. Suparna. What does Suparna mean? Something with excellent leaves, something with excellent feathers. So it can be the feminine Garuda, it can be a lotus, it can be a collection of lotuses, all of these. But the key word is Parna, Parna. What is Parna? Parna is a leaf. But if I just say Parna is a leaf, I'm not doing justice to Sanskrit. Parna is something that imparts a green color. Now I am deliberately stressing this because in this day and age, first thing in the morning, read my article, watch my interview, barrage of emails, WhatsApp messages. I is very important. I with a capital. In the English language, I is with a capital. In the English language, the structure of any sentence is subject first. Verb, object, adverbs, adjectives follow. In Sanskrit, it's just the other way around. It is the verb which is important. The subject is unimportant. The adjective is unimportant. The object is unimportant. I start with the verb. Which is why, for anyone steeped, in my view, in Indian languages, including Sanskrit, it's much more easy to give up notions of aham and mama. Because aham and mama do not naturally come to us. I will not normally say, I am Vivek. My natural inclination will be to say, I am known by the name of Vivek. Or I am called Vivek. Unless we forget our languages and immerse ourselves in English, I will naturally be at the back. Translating from the Sanskrit. The United Nations has a figure, number. Since the beginning of Gutenberg, since the time of Gutenberg, how many books have been published in any language in the world? What is the total number of books published? All languages in the world since the beginning of printing. The figure is 130 million. Estimate 130 million. There is a Government of India scheme which you may have heard of. It's called Namami, the National Manuscript Mission, with the manuscript of Puthi having been defined as something that is more than 75 years old. Do remember, this is only one small subset of our treasure house of knowledge. Because our knowledge was transmitted orally. Writing came much, much later. And much of our oral tradition has been lost and is being lost as I speak here today. But we are talking about Puthis as defined under Namami. What is Namami's task? Namami's task at the moment is only to list how many manuscripts there are in India. List. Digitization, translation comes much later. First, let's list them. As of today, Namami has listed around 3.5 million. Namami's estimates are that in India, in private collections and in public collections, again an estimate, there are 40 million manuscripts. 50,000 outside the country. What is interesting about these 40 million manuscripts is that 95% of them have not been translated. 95% of these manuscripts have not been translated. 2/3 of these manuscripts are in Sanskrit. A large number are in Pali. The language may be Sanskrit, but the script varied from one part to another. There are scripts where we do not even have people in India now who can read those scripts. So to read those scripts, we are getting people trained in Heidelberg and Oxford and Cambridge. How will we even know what knowledge exists in these texts if they have not even been translated? I'm an economist, mentioned in the introduction. Texts that talk about the economy. If I ask you, you will invariably say Kautilya's Arthashastra. Kautilya's Arthashastra had vanished. There were references to it. No one knew where that manuscript was until Shama Shastri discovered Kautilya's Arthashastra in the year 1905 and translated it. In similar vein, we do not even know what is in these texts. They have not been translated. When they have been translated, what has normally been translated is literature, kavya, poetry. Poetry is always difficult to translate. Sometimes people ask me, how many words are there in Sanskrit? It's impossible to answer. How many words are there in the English language? The Oxford Dictionary, large Oxford Dictionary, not the concise one, has a vocabulary of about 170,000 words. Shakespeare had a vocabulary of about 30,000 words. Most of us have a vocabulary of around 15,000 words. Forget the Makarand Paranjya paper, otherwise most of us have 15,000 words. Sanskrit, you cannot even answer the question. Why? Let me give you an example. And the example I'm going to give you is from a poet, famous poet, Kalidasa. One of Kalidasa's kavyas, minor kavyas, called Meghadutam. Meghadutam, as several of you may know, is one where there is no story really. Here is a yaksha who was Kubera's attendant. Because of a transgression, he has been banished by Kubera. He has been exiled for a year, separated from his beloved, and his beloved is there in Kubera's capital in Alakapuri. The monsoon, he sees a cloud, and the yaksha sends the cloud as a messenger to Alakapuri. So in the first part, Purva Megham, the cloud goes to Alakapuri. In the second part, Uttar Megham, the cloud comes back. No story, it's generally a description of nature. So that the cloud does not get lost, the yaksha is describing to the cloud what Alakapuri is like. I will translate, don't worry. Vahyo dana sthita harashiras chandrika dhauti harmya. One word. Vahyo dana sthita harashiras chandrika dhauti harmya. What is the translation? In the garden outside, there is a statue of Shiva. Shiva has the crescent moon on his forehead, and the light from that crescent moon is lighting up all the mansions. All of that in one single word. It illustrates not just the Kalidasa's beauty, it illustrates the fact that because of Sandhi and Samasa, in principle the number of words that can exist in Sanskrit is actually infinite. Kalidasa has been translated. Poetry is difficult to translate, but several poets have been translated. But I want to talk about texts that have generally not been translated. So I'm now moving on to the third part, which is Itihasa and Purana. Itihasa is not myth. Itihasa means iti hi asa. This is indeed what happened. By this, no one is trying to say everything happened exactly as it is described in these texts. Obviously, there have been embellishments. In a process of oral transmission, people added, but the core of it is itihasa. The word itihasa was first used for the Valmiki Ramayana, then applied to the Mahabharata also. And then you have the Puranas. The Mahabharata, the major sections of the Mahabharata are known as Parva. The major sections of the Valmiki Ramayana are known as Kanda. What does Kanda mean? What does Parva mean? Well, they both mean branches of a tree. But there's a difference. Kanda is a more solid branch, thicker branch, larger branch. Parva is a more flexible branch. The Mahabharata was composed by Veda Vyasa. Veda Vyasa, by the way, in case you do not know, is a title. There have been 27 other Veda Vyasas before this Veda Vyasa. This particular Veda Vyasa is 28th in the line. His proper name is Krishna Dvaipayan. Krishna because he was dark, Dvaipayan because he was born in an island. Anyone who collates and classifies the Vedas as happens from one yuga to another in the upper yuga is conferred the title of Veda Vyasa. So Veda Vyasa composed the Mahabharata. The Mahabharata is like a novel. The Valmiki Ramayana is like a story, long story. What do I mean by that? A novel is one that presents the events from the viewpoints of multiple protagonists. So you have Duryodhan's point of view, you have Yudhishthir's point of view, you have Draupadi's point of view, you have everyone's point of view. Whereas the Ramayana, the Valmiki Ramayana, is essentially from Rama's point of view. Which is why I use the expression long story. But there's another difference. Well, there are several differences between the Mahabharata and the Valmiki Ramayana. But yet another difference is Parva. So Parva, flexible, it adjusted. So any story that came along was put into the Mahabharata. These days, traveling on trains has changed, but earlier we used to travel with hold-alls. So the Mahabharata is like a bit like a hold-all. Everything was put in it. Whereas the Valmiki Ramayana, anyone who was unhappy with what Valmiki had depicted in the Valmiki Ramayana came along and composed another Ramayana. So even in Sanskrit, there are 4 or 5, depending on how you count, Ramayans. In passing, there's another difference between the two. Both of them are poets. By the way, short digression on the nature of Sanskrit poetry. Today, if we use the word poem, normally we think of rhyming. Poetry is associated with rhyming. But rhyming was not important in Sanskrit poetry at all. It was not important in Sanskrit poetry at all until Jayadeva. Idam Vedam Akhedam. This was rhyming. Or again from Jayadev's Gita Govinda, to my mind, probably the most beautiful poem anyone has ever written for his beloved Krishna. If you speak something, your teeth, white teeth, glisten like the moonlight. Your quivering lips are like chakora birds which are drinking in the moonbeams from your moon-like face. Vowel sound was like Sanskrit, other languages are taught very badly. So in school, choti e, badi e. If I am pronouncing it right, why do I have to say choti e and badi e? It should be obvious from the pronunciation. So depending on the combination, remember I told you that most Sanskrit shlokas had 4 lines, not all of them. Kurukshetre samavedayutsava mamaka pandava shaiva bhima kurvata sanjaya dharma kshetre kurukshetre samavedayutsava 8. Mantras we encountered every day. Anushtup. Vakratunda Mahakaya. 8. Surya Koti Samaprabha. 8. Saraswati Mahabhage. Vidya Kamalolochane. 8. All Anushtup, Anushtup. The first shloka that Valmiki has composed on seeing the hunter shoot one of the Kroncha birds was composed in Anushtup. And because it was composed as a result of an act of sorrow or shoka, the Valmiki Ramayana tells us this came to be known as a shloka. Let me give you one minor example and one serious example. Both from a text you're familiar with, and that's the Bhagavad Gita. The minor one first. Famous shloka from the Bhagavad Gita, I don't even think I have to translate it. Vasangsi jirnani yatha vihaya navani grinnati naraparani tatha sharirani vihaya jirnani anyani sangyati navani dehi. Don't need to translate it. Just as I give up old clothes and wear new clothes, the Atman discards the old physical body and enters a new body. Next shloka. Nainang chindanti shastrani, nainang dahati pavakaha, na chainang kledanti apa, no shosheti maruta. Nainang chindanti shastrani. I'm translating now. Nainang chindanti shastrani, weapons cannot sever it. Nainang dahati pavakaha, the fire cannot burn it. Nacha kledanti apaha, the water cannot wet it. No shosheti maruta, the wind cannot dry it. I've done a perfect job of translating. But why Shastra? Why Pavakaha? Why Apaha? Why Maruta? What were the Panchabhuts? Khiti, Up, Tej, Marut, Vom is space. Everything is full of space. The story goes, anecdote, it's a true story, that when Niels Bohr first discovered that atoms were packed with blank space, he was very scared of waking up in the morning and placing his foot on the ground in case everything collapsed. But space is everywhere. Forget the space. Shastras, what are they made out of? Metals. Where do the metals come from? earth. So actually the reason those things exist is because it is earth, fire, water and air. Dhritarashtra has asked. Sanjay is replying. Drishtva tu pandavanikam vurang duryadhanastada acharyam upasangyamya raja vachanam abravit. Having seen the Pandava army, King Duryodhan saw that and Duryodhan saying, listen carefully. Pashya etan panduputra nam acharya mahating chamum vyurang drupadaputrena tava shishyena dhimata. O preceptor, acharya, behold. Pashya etan. What does etan mean? These. Go back and read your translation of the Bhagavad Gita. Everything else will have been translated accurately. Check whether the word etan has been translated. Etan means these. Aparjaptam tadasmakam valang bhishavirakshitam parjaptam tu idameteshang balang vimavirakshitam. Unlimited are those our armies protected by Bhishma. When it is Duryodhana's armies, those. When it is, again check your translation of the Bhagavad Gita to see whether those and these have been translated. Eva muktva rishikesha gurakeshana parantapa senayarubhayar madhye sthapayitva rathottamam. Unimportant. Partha, Arjuna, behold, these Pandava army, Kaurava army. According to the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna was standing in front of the Krishna and Arjuna was standing in front of the Kaurava army, and Duryodhana and Dronacharya were standing in front of the Pandava army. These are armies which are supposed to fight, and here you have these people. Lay down your weapons, you're all friends. So until the bugle sounded next morning, you are friends. So I wonder, and this is not a substantive part of my talk, but I wonder for historians. Ashoka and Kalinga War. Kalinga War, we do not have firm figures on casualties. 100,000, 150,000 on either side. But the Kalinga War was the first war where there was collateral damage in the form of civilian populations being destroyed. So I look at Shamrat Ashoka's edict, number 13, which is supposed to tell us how the river Daya overflowed with blood and Ashoka turned to non-violence. So I look up Edict 13, and all it tells me actually is that Ashoka was crestfallen because he violated Dharma. Nothing more. I'm not a historian, but I wonder, did he violate Dharma because he violated the norms of war and inflicted damage, collateral damage on the civilian population, which was against all canons of war? Or was it what we are normally told? Now, I talked about Itihas and Purana. Itihas and Purana, unfortunately, they are labeled as myths. Obviously, the Bhagavad Gita has been translated. But the others, in the English language, almost never. As Makarand told you, when I say almost never, I am talking about translations into the English language. In the vernacular language, obviously translations exist. I'm talking about the English language. Important because there is a generation out there which, despite our lamentations, is not only no longer familiar with Sanskrit, it is not even, that generation is not even familiar with the vernacular languages. So English has become the medium. So you need to have these translations in English. Sometimes when people hear that I did an unabridged translation of the Mahabharata, they say, wait a minute, why? Aren't there so many translations of the Mahabharata floating around? The answer is no. What you see are abridged translations. And later on I will tell you why reading the unabridged translations is so very important. What you see are abridged translations. As Makarand said, there are just 3 unabridged translations of the Mahabharata in English. Only 3. For the Valmiki Ramayana, there are 5. So actually there are just 2 people who have done the Mahabharata, the Valmiki Ramayana, Manmatana Datta and I, and of course the Harivangsha. The Harivangsha, by the way, is not quite a Purana. It is sometimes called a Purana. When we meet Krishna in the Mahabharata, Krishna is already an adult. So a question is asked, what about Krishna's childhood exploits? Those are there also in the Puranas, but the Harivangsha is about those. So the Harivangsha is regarded as a sequel or an appendix to the Mahabharata. And then there are the Puranas. After composing the Mahabharata, Veda Vyasa is believed to have composed the Puranas. Whether the Puranas originally had only one original Purana text is a sterile discussion because we will never be able to prove it one way or the other. The fact of the matter is, today we have 18 major Puranas, Ashtadas Mahapurana, which vary enormously in length. The shortest is about 10,000 shlokas. The longest, the Skanda Purana, is 85,000 shlokas. So the Skanda Purana is about the size of the Mahabharata. And the 18 Mahapuranas taken together are 4 times the size of the Mahabharata. So the 18 Mahapuranas taken together will come to about 12 million words. When I started translating the Mahabharata, there is a lady with whom I have a love-hate kind of relationship, in the sense that she respects me, I respect her, but we aren't particularly fond of each other. And this is to be edited out from the transcription. Her name is Wendy Doniger. So Wendy sent me an email saying, "Dear Bibek, please be careful. The track record of people who have tried to translate the Mahabharata is not very good." What she meant is that there are at least 3 people who started translating the Mahabharata and died halfway. One of which was Professor Van Buitenen, who started the Chicago translation. And one of the reasons why I got interested in translating is because of Van Buitenen. In the Nala Damayanti story which I mentioned, the Mahabharata talks about Kali, as in Kali Yuga, or wickedness or evil having entered Nala's body, as a result of which Nala began to gamble. Van Buitenen's translation says Kali. And I thought, what? Kali? What is Kali doing in the Mahabharata? So lo and behold, I went and looked up, and it was not Kali, but Kali. Now at one point, I think it's somewhat dysfunctional to criticize Westerners for not doing the translations properly, It's a negative response and is meaningless until we ourselves begin to do the translations. Had the Sanskrit Pandits done the translations, I would not have bothered. But the Sanskrit Pandits are not translating these texts, which is why you have this bizarre situation of an economist becoming a dilettante translator. So Mahabharata, as long as I was translating the Mahabharata, because of Wendy Doniger's email, my wife used to have nightmares. Wendy has not sent an email, I have nightmares because translating the 18 Mahapuranas seems to stretch into eternity. I am not even very sure whether I will be able to accomplish it, but the plan right now is to do, before the Skanda and the Padma Purana, which are long before them, to do one Purana a year. Bhagavad Purana, as Makarand told you, will be out on the 7th of January. I am now halfway through translating the Markandeya Purana. I do not normally disagree with Makarand. On one minor thing I will. The Markandeya Purana is also extremely important. The Bhagavad Purana is, but the Markandeya Purana also is. The Markandeya Purana forms the basis for the worship of the goddess. It is the basis for all the puja, Durga Puja and other pujas that are done of the goddess. The Bhagavad Gita has 700 shlokas. There is a Devi Bhagavat in the Markandeya Puran which also has 700 shlokas, which is just as important for those who worship Devi. The Markandeya Puran has a most interesting beginning. So let me quickly mention the beginning. Battle of Kurukshetra raging. Tremendous battle of Kurukshetra raging. Arjuna fighting with Bhagadatta. Bhagadatta was the king of Pragjyotishpur, which is where Assam is now, and Bhagadatta came fighting on a gigantic elephant known as Supratik. They kept shooting arrows at each other. Arjuna shot an arrow. I'm not sure whether for a bird one should use the word pregnant, but a pregnant bird was flying. Arjuna's arrow struck that bird. The bird fell down on the battlefield of Kurukshetra and would have died. But destiny played a hand. This gigantic elephant Supratik had a gigantic bell hanging around its neck. Arjuna shot another arrow, it severed that bell. The bell fell down and covered the dead bird's body. This bird laid 4 eggs. While the battle of Kurukshetra was raging, these birdlings hatched, survived on the mother's dead flesh, heard everything that happened outside, heard Bhishma lying down on his bed of arrows, instruct Yudhishthira in the course of Shanti Parva and Anushasana Parva, and became extremely wise. So once a sage, so after the war was over, the bell was uncovered, these birds were discovered, they were extremely wise birds. They went off to perform austerities on the slopes of Mount Vindhya. Once someone came to the sage Markandeya and said, impart wisdom to me. Markandeya said, don't come to me. Go to these birds. And that is how the Markandeya Puran starts. Why should we read IIAS and Purana? Why should we read these texts? And this is the last segment of what I want to speak about. What is Hinduism? I can define it in all kinds of different ways. Even the Supreme Court has attempted to define Hinduism. One definition of Hinduism, or one possible interpretation of Hinduism, is Hinduism is Vedanta and Upanishads. But the texts of Hinduism, of Vedanta and Upanishads, were composed by who? They were composed by people who were in Vanaprastha, people who are in Sannyasa. The vast majority of the Indian population then and now, they were doing what they continue to do today. Earning money, living their lives, doing dharma, artha, kama, moksha, pursuing these. And another definition of Hinduism is not just the Vedanta and the Upanishad, another interpretation, but the popular dharma as practiced by people who were in Garhastha. And dharma is also there. What is dharma? Yah dharyate sa dharma. What holds up is dharma. What holds up the fabric of society is dharma. As a grihastha, there are 5 great sacrifices that I have to do every day. Pancha Mahayajna. One of those is tending to guests. I use the word guest. What I mean is atithi. Atithi is not a guest. If Makaran invites me for dinner, I am not an atithi. Atithi is someone who turns up unannounced. Atithi. That is what an atithi is. So an atithi is not an expected guest. In the course of my work, I travel to remote parts of India. We are losing it in metros. I don't know whether we are losing it in Shimla, but certainly in the rural areas even now. I go to someone's house at meal time and they will say, Khana kha ke jaiye. It's ingrained. In the West, someone invites us for dinner. So my wife and I begin to discuss, what shall we take them as a gift? What is this? Our tradition is completely different. The guest receives a gift because the guest is doing a favor to the host by turning up, so it is the guest who receives a gift. This we are forgetting. The king, there is an extensive discussion of what the king was supposed to do. Rajan. If I ask you for words that mean king, you will say Raja, Rajan. But Rajan is not any king. The root word for Rajan is someone who delights the subjects, who causes delight to the subjects. There are other words for king like Nripa, lord of the earth, lord of people. But a Nripa is not necessarily a Raja. There's a wicked king named Vena. He was a wicked king, he oppressed everyone, did not punish the wicked, did not protect the good. So the Brahmanas got very angry, they killed Vena. But once Vena was dead, without a king, there was anarchy. You needed a king to protect the virtuous, to protect the good, to punish the wicked. But Vena had died without a son. So what was going to be done? The Brahmanas began to knead Vena's dead body, the right arm. And the right arm was thick. The word Prithu means thick. So when they began to knead, thing came out. A sun emerged. And this sun was Prithu. Prithu was the first Rajan. He created the first cities, the first agricultural tracts. He laid down rules for exploiting the earth according to, without over-exploitation, which is why the earth became his daughter, which is why the earth is known as Prithvi. So Prithu was the first Raja. By the way, Prithu carried Vena's dead body around because wicked father, he wanted to do something for his father. Someone told Prithu, take the dead body to the Saraswati, to the river Saraswati. So he took the dead body there, he kept it in a tent, he went to have a bath. Meanwhile, there was a dog which had gone to have a bath, have a dip in the Saraswati, came back into the tent, and like dogs do, shook itself. And some drops of the Saraswati, from the Saraswati, fell on Vena's dead body. As a result of that punya, Vena went straight to heaven. The dog also went straight to heaven, only instance of the dog having gone to heaven. And you will see the dog in the night sky. It's the brightest star in the night sky, known in English as Sirius, in Indian languages it was known as Lutak. So all of these tell us about what the king was supposed to do. There was a lot that the individual was supposed to do. There was a lot that the community was supposed to do. The British authored district gazetteers. Initially for the country as a whole, then for districts. Ambala District Gazetteer for the year 1883. What is happening in Ambala in 1883? A canal has to be built. How much will that canal cost? 45,000 rupees in 1883 rupees. How much did the government pay? 20,000. Who paid the remainder 25,000? The community. You suggest that today and all hell will break loose. But the tax GDP ratio today is 17% of GDP. In Kautilya's time, it was 16.96% of GDP, 17%. So, while it is right to expect the government or the king to do various things, it is always also right to question, have we abdicated our responsibilities as communities and as individuals, which is also the Dharma that is enunciated in these texts. There is a lot that is in the nature of geography. I am not suggesting, I am being careful because the press is here, I think. I am not suggesting that Baramulla should be renamed. But it is useful to know that Baramulla is known as Baramulla because of Varahamula, because that is where Vishnu in his Varaha avatar raised the earth up. All of you know the story of Manu. And the story I have in mind is the Matsya avatar, where the fish appears before Manu in a river, then in a pot, and so on and so forth. Where is that river? That river is a river known as Kritamala. Today Kritamala has been reduced to the state of a Nala, which is in Madurai. It used to be a tributary of the Vagai, but today it is a Nala near Madurai railway station, and we don't even know that this was Kritamala. So tremendous amount of geographical information. A tremendous amount of itihasa. I'm not going to get into broader issues of, let us say, dating the Kurukshetra war. There are different ways of dating the Kurukshetra war, and if you leave out the astronomical parts, all of those have a remarkable degree of convergence to something around 900 to 1100 BCE. Whether it is geology, whether it is archaeology, whether it is changes in language, whether it is textual descriptions, all of these have a remarkable degree of convergence. But the Puranas also give us genealogical accounts. From the date of accession of Parikshit to Mahapadmananda, which is recorded. Depending on the Purana, 1000 years, 1015 years or 1050 years. And of course, beautiful, beautiful poetry. Mandadari's lamentation in the Valmiki Ramayana. Krishna's Rasha Leela, the song of the gopis in the Bhagavad Purana. Wonderful poetry. And as I said, the base of our Dharma, the way images are constructed is based on the norms set out in the Agni Purana. The funeral rites, Shraddha ceremonies are essentially based on the Garuda Purana. So here are these texts which form the basis for much that we do. I talked about the translations of the Mahabharata and the Valmiki Ramayana. Some of these Puranas have never been translated into English. The Bhagavad Puran being a major one has been, but some of the other Puranas have not. So we should read them, preferably in Sanskrit. If we cannot read them in Sanskrit, we should read them in the form of some translation that is unabridged. And we should not reduce our understanding of the Puranas to what we gather.
Thank you, sir, for that command performance. In our midst, a live Purana, as it were, by one of our geniuses today. I first heard Bibek some years ago, and I didn't know him. I only knew his writings. And I walked up to him and I said, I just want to tell you, sir, you are a genius. And Bibek said he must have forgotten. So many people probably tell him that. He paused and said, who are you? What is your name? And believe me, that was my first encounter with Bibek. You heard from our Vice Chairman how Bibek went back to Shri Hatta or Silhet, his ancestral village. Sir, I'm sure that your ancestors will be very proud of you today. I'm sure that your first school, St. Peter's in Shillong, will be very proud of you today. The Radhakrishnan Mission School, where you also studied, will be very proud of you today. The Presidency College, one of our earliest colleges in this part of the world, in Asia, founded by Ram Mohan Roy, called Hindu College earlier. 1818, if I'm not mistaken, or 1817, will be very proud of you today. The Delhi School of Economics, Trinity College, Cambridge. But sir, we at the Indian Institute of Advanced Study are the proudest of all these institutions. We are nestling in the Himalayas, and Himachal is considered to be the land of the gods. Devbhumi Kehlata. I'm sure there are many deities in their subtle forms in this room today who have come to listen to you, sir. We are deeply honored. You're a Bharat Shiromani as far as we are concerned. Thank you for gracing us with your presence. I'm so moved and overwhelmed, I don't want to say anything more because silence speaks louder than words. But I will request the Secretary of the Indian Institute of Advanced Study, Premchandji, to propose a vote of thanks.
Honorable Shri Bibek Debroy ji, Professor Makran, Director of the Institute, Professor Chamanlal Gupta, Vice Chairman, IIAS Governing Body, distinguished guests, I would like to express my sincere thanks and gratitude to Shri Bibek Debroy ji for accepting our invitation to deliver 23rd RKML on lecture on Dharma on translation, Sanskrit classics in contemporary times. It's honor and privilege to have you with us, sir. We are deeply grateful to you, sir, for your enlightening address, and we are really very inspiring, thankful for your very enlightening address, sir. We thank you very much, sir. I would also like to thank Professor Makranji for his encouraging, for his support ever since he has joined the institute. We have witnessed that he has been trying to transform the academic activities of the institute. This which we have witnessed, why such a wonderful lecture today. I thank you very much, sir. I would also like to thank Professor C.L. Gupta for his gracious presence. I would also like to thank all the distinguished guests who came from different parts of the institution in the city. At the end, I would also like to thank my colleagues who have put their best effort to make this event a grand success. Last,
I think some people may want to speak to Viveka. He'll be available downstairs. Please don't mob him. You can take a few selfies. But after that, we will all depart. Thank you all very much once again. May I please have your attention? I'm so glad you started your soup already. But I would request you to pay attention to a very important part of our day today, which is our traditional Himachali way of honoring our speaker, Shri Bibek Debroy. I'm afraid you can please finish your soup, sir. All right. Shukrana, please come. Please enjoy your lunch. Sorry for the interruption. Yeah. ये ठीक है, ये थोड़ा फिटिंग ही होना चाहिए, ये तो प्रोटेक्शन की